This is James Taylor, and you're listening to The Creative Life. The Creative Life podcast is a show created for you, the creative. If you're looking for inspiration, motivation, and advice while at home, at work, or on your daily commute, then this show is for you. Each episode brings you a successful creative, whether that's a musician, writer, artist, designer, performer, educator, or creative entrepreneur. They share their journey, their successes, their failures, their creative process, their insights, and much, much more. This episode is sponsored by C-School, the online school for creativity training. If you'd like to unleash your creative potential and access a free creativity blueprint training series, then just head over to c.school. That's www.c.school for your free training series. In today's episode, I speak with Amy E. Smith, and we speak about overcoming the inner critic and dealing with disempowering beliefs. Enjoy this episode. Hey there, it's James Taylor, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Amy E. Smith. Amy is a certified confidence coach, masterful speaker, and personal empowerment expert. Founder of thejoyjunkie.com, Amy uses her roles as coach, writer, podcaster, and speaker to move individuals to a place of radical personal empowerment and self-love. With acute focus on helping people find their voice, she is highly sought after for her uncommon style of irreverence, wisdom, and humor, and has been a featured expert on Fox 5 San Diego and yourtango.com. It's my great pleasure to have Amy with us today. So welcome, Amy.
Thank you. I'm excited to hang out and chat today.
So share with everyone what's going on in your world just now.
Well, I am a California transplant from the Southern California area recently to the South in North Carolina. So I'm sort of adjusting to this sort of moseying, slower sort of pace when I'm used to kind of go. So that's been sort of an environmental shift for me lately, and just changing some dynamics inside of my relationship because of that move, which has been kind of interesting and fun to navigate. And tons of personal projects, stuff going on in my work, but also I recently started taking up kickboxing. Wow. So it's got me feeling like a false sense of confidence, I think. I'm like, I think I can take everyone. And I just hope I don't have to put that to the test. But that's a little hodgepodge of what's been going on in my world lately.
So I love your brand. I love on your website, you really get a sense of, like, really quickly about your brand. In the photography, the layout, the copy, everything that's there. But so from someone as an outsider looking in, it looks, wow, she has it together. She's kind of got this whole picture sorted out. But I wonder from the other side, from your side, what was the evolve of the kind of Amy Smith brand? How did that arrive at?
Ooh, that's interesting. Well, when I first got involved in personal development, which is about 10 years ago now, I always had sort of that sort of in your face, a little more aggressive, a little more irreverent, I guess you could say. And I learned very, very quickly at the very beginning that the more authentic I was and the more confident I was standing behind all of the elements that made Amy, whether it's, being obsessed with Romy and Tony Robbins and also red lipstick and Scotch whiskey, So the ability to envelop all of these elements of who we are, I felt enabled me to really evoke that from the people that were following me. So there was this whole idea of what a professional looked like. And I kind of thought, if I'm going to be involved in this career path that really truly is all about authenticity, then that needs to permeate everything that I do. So in the very beginning, there was a little bit of a hitch there, like am I not being professional? But I very, very quickly realized that the more authentic I was, the more I absolutely gathered the right people towards me. And I think that's truly the case really for anybody. I don't think it's some sort of like magic secret sauce. But then the more vigilant I got about that and the more I owned it and kept progressing in that way, the more things started to build and unfold.
Essentially, there's that expression, your vibe attracts your tribe. And as I was looking at your site, I was actually thinking of another friend of mine, Rob Waldo Waldman, who's like a Speaker Hall of Fame keynote speaker. And Rob kind of talks about it. He said, in a plain vanilla world, I'm mint choc chip. I want to stand out. I want you to go on my site and within 5 seconds either go, wow, no, that's absolutely not, he's not for me, or tell me more. And I think a site like yours, imagine some people will go on it and they're just going to go, no, that's not my vibe. That's like, but for other people that, the people that get kind of what you do, and obviously you kind of really know your audience, and we have a lot of kind of crossover in terms of our audiences here as well. That's absolutely the kind of that kind of authentic voice that they want to hear from as well. So I salute you for doing that and going down that route.
Well, thank you. It felt to me like it would be total hypocrisy to be in an industry that's all about loving who you are and owning who you are, and then for me to be a facade. So, and I completely echo your sentiments about what you were sharing with your speaker friend, that it has been the difference between creating people who follow you of interest and then raving loyal fans, because they feel like you speak the same way they speak. And then it all comes back to this whole notion of what I'm promoting, which is finding your voice and actually using it, being able to communicate from a place of power. So it all kind of folds in together nicely, I think.
Now, you wrote a blog post I was reading the other day. It was inner critic or intuition, which kind of gets, so you had a sense, obviously, with going that you kind of went with your intuition. This is the authentic me. This is who I'm about. But that's you in the blog piece that you wrote. You kind of spoke about like, how do you know when it's intuition, like this is the right way, and how do you know when it's your inner critic that's kind of speaking up as well? So can you kind of talk us through a little bit your thinking on that?
Well, thank you for picking the hardest topic because it took me years to get the courage to release that post, because it's one of those categories in personal development that's incredibly nuanced. And the reason why is because fear is present in both scenarios, right? So if, let's say, you have like the biggest speaking gig of your career that's available to you, and you start to have this element of fear. Well, until we dissect that piece of fear, we can't tell if that fear is in service of us or against us, right? So you could be operating from a place where you've got all of this fear just because you're playing a big game, right? Just because this is a big speaking gig, it's the biggest one of your life, it has tons of ripple opportunities. So you start to experience this fear, but it's from this place of but your inner critic getting the better of you, essentially saying like, oh, wait, you're going to fall on your face, or are you good enough to do this, or all of the barrage of commentary that follows in our mind. Now, sometimes it's an intuitive fear where maybe the person booking you rubbed you the wrong way, or what they're asking you to do, selling from the back of the room or the front of the room, whatever. Whatever they're asking for of you feels shady, or there's some sort of intuitive piece where you go, ooh, maybe I'm experiencing this fear about saying yes to this thing because my intuition is trying to give me some alarm bells here. So really, truly what that is, it's deciphering what that fear is about. Is it you getting in your own way, or is it truly our own physiological self saying like, hey, James, pay attention, like abort mission. This is not healthy for you. And the biggest challenge of this is that it's a different answer every single time. So it involves introspection in every single scenario, because it's not always intuition and it's not always inner critic. So you kind of have to approach each one as a unique case.
It's interesting, that word intuition, I think for some people that can feel a little bit woo-woo. It's a little bit, intuition and things. I was reading an author the other day, Anne Lamont, who wrote a book, Bird by Bird, all about the writing process. And she said the way that she kind of got over that is instead of using the word intuition, she calls it broccoli. Bizarre, but I know. So she just says, like, whenever, like, when you have this fear, oh, that's broccoli showing up. And the reason that she does that is because by moving, I think the reason by taking away the word intuition, which feels woo-woo, which feels like it's not founded in anything, to broccoli, which is, this is good for me, this is serving a purpose. It has some use. It's coming from somewhere, and I'm not quite sure where, but it has some kind of purpose. It allows her to can actually look at it and observe it. Even if she says, actually, no, it's not right, I'm going to go ahead with this thing. By using that slight change of phrase and how she thinks about it in her head, it allows it for it to be useful for her, as opposed to something that's kind of holds her back.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love that. I love that because words do matter to us, and we have sort of semantics that we either align with or that we are kind of repelled from. And, what's interesting with this is I also feel like it's a huge piece of our kind of Western culture of emotions are weird, right? Like the minute anybody tears up, they automatically apologize, right? Like, oh, I'm so sorry that you have to see me being emotional. We don't talk about tapping into these resources that we already have, like emotion, like intuition, because we think they're for the hippies and we think we have to burn sage and do that shit too. But really what it is it's been given to us as a compass the same way sight or sound or smell has been given to us to decipher the world around us, right? So we can touch something and go, holy no, that's painful. Don't touch that hot stove, right? The same thing is happening for us on sort of an emotional sense. That's your intuition. It's just saying, hey, this does feel good to your system or this is bad for your system, like broccoli.
And so I noticed on your site, you interact with people, you help people in different ways. Obviously you have your speaking, but one of the kind of key things you have is the kind of coaching part that you do, which is either the kind of one-on-one or the group coaching or retreats. Yeah. And so I'm interested because a lot of people watching and listening to this are coaches, maybe coaches themselves, or they're thinking about going on that journey to becoming coaches. From your perspective as a coach, what do each of those different ways of helping people do for you? How can you add value to people's lives in that way? And also, what have you found those different kind of one-on-one group or the kind of retreat experiential side? How are they different? How do they help people in different ways?
That's a great question. A lot of that distills down to how you operate best. So, for example, my husband and myself have very different approaches to physical fitness, let's say. So he knows that in order for him to get his specific results, he does best in group environments or working one-on-one with a personal trainer. That is always motivational to him. For me, I have my own set of personal fitness goals, but I love, love, love working out at home. I'm motivated by being by myself, and that's changed a little bit with the kickboxing stuff. But we both have this overall goal that's fitness related, but how we want to get to that goal, we're motivated in very different ways. So same is true for people starting a business. Like, do you have a lot of creative juices, let's say in the morning, or working with other people, or collaborating with others, or having just one person being your sounding board? So when I look at these various mediums for people to work with me, it really a lot of times comes down to how do you thrive? Some people love that repetition over 3 to 4 months. Some people really want it to be a group environment. Some people only want to work with me. They don't want to deal with anybody else. And then some people want to just get through it all in one weekend, and that's typically the people who opt for the retreat. I personally feel like the most sustained change gets created through repetition over a longer period of time. So I tend to advocate the retreats more as sort of interims throughout your personal development journey to like spark up creativity, to re-energize or get reconnected to your tools, and more of the long-term stuff as creating a habitual way of being that's different than how you are now.
I was talking with a friend of mine the other day, and she was saying how she feels that one of the challenges that she has is being always wanting to try and please people, to kind of do the thing that pleases people. And as a result, she has put herself maybe behind a little bit. It's kind of knocked her confidence in some ways as well. She has that. She's always putting people first in a good way, but also doing things because she knows it's going to be the easy please for some, not necessarily what that other person could actually use most. Now, I know that's something that you work a lot when you're coaching with clients on, is kind of dealing with this people pleasing. So when you first have that, how does this present itself when clients come to you? Do they kind of know that they're doing this most of the time, or is it really in a case of investigating with them that you can figure out that that's actually a challenge for them?
That's really a fascinating question because the answer is quite interesting. There are a large grouping of people who absolutely identify as people pleasers. They would say to you, like, I'm a yes man. Or in California, we would say totally girl, like totally. Oh my gosh, I'll totally do whatever you need. I need to change that a little bit now that I'm Southern.
I don't know what the North Carolina version of that is.
I don't know, like y'all, something or other. But yeah, so now I totally lost my train of thought. What was I talking? Oh, people pleasing. Yes, so they completely identify. Like, I know I let my mom walk all over me. I know that every time I have a speaking engagement, I will just take whatever they give me instead of advocating for myself. And then there's a whole other grouping of people who don't necessarily claim that moniker, but they would say, I'm highly invested in the opinions of others, which typically contorts your behavior. If you think that a grouping of people are going to deem you more intelligent or acceptable, you tend to tweak your behavior in a way to elicit that response. So I, a lot of times, will unpack sometimes the nomenclature or the moniker that they might use to identify themselves. But almost always when I say, can you say that you really don't give a what other people think? Or do you care what people in the office have to say about you? And they're like, absolutely. So once I kind of use that sort of verbiage, I can start to see that, yeah, there's still this huge investment in how I'm viewed from the outside world.
So once they recognize that is an issue and that's something they need to address, it's not serving them. It's actually maybe holding them back in their careers, what they're trying to do with their lives. What is that very first step, the intervention that you have to do with them to help them on that journey?
The number one kind of thing that needs to be observed constantly is the self-talk, right? Like, what is the constant stream of either emotional current or language that you are saying inside your mind on a 24/7 basis? Because no matter if you listen to, an empowering podcast or you journal for an hour, if what's happening nonstop in your mind is negative, it's going to trump any positive thing you do for 30 minutes or an hour. So that needs to be on lockdown. But the biggest piece that we start off on when I work one-on-one with people or in, some of my group programs is disempowering beliefs and untangling the things that we've attached to as true, right? So we all do this subconsciously based on family of origin or how we've grown up. And so let's say you were a musician growing up and you loved piano, but you had a teacher who told you were worthless and that you would never amount to anything. You might take that statement and create a really irrational belief about who you are and about your own abilities. It might get you to work harder and play the piano, or it might get you to throw in the towel altogether, or you might keep trying to prove yourself over and over again through everything you do in your life, not just in a musical forum. So all of those things that we attach to as beliefs in our youth, or even during a tumultuous time like a divorce or having a baby or whatever, will attach to beliefs as truth, and then we start to gather evidence to support those truths. Spoiler alert, most people adopt the belief that they're just not good enough for whatever reason. Sometimes it's, I'm not a good enough parent, I'm not creative enough, I'm not a good enough speaker, I'm not intelligent enough, thin enough, sexy enough, the list goes on and on and on. And what happens is that's just sort of this elusive, intangible thing that we're trying to attach to, like, when can I actually be enough? When can I actually be worthy? But we're the ones who keep changing the marker or the milestone. And so we keep, attaining this level of success doesn't make me happy. It must be something else. This is not enough. This must be something else. It must be having a baby. It must be getting married. It must be this gig or whatever. And then what that ends up being is an entire life of a chase for happiness instead of fulfillment from within. So to answer your question, it's beliefs.
Yeah. And I guess, that when you start to look at those, especially the limiting beliefs, and you kind of just like pick them up and you go, okay, what is this thing? And you can work with a coach and to kind of help kind of look at that thing. And then you often realize that, like, where did that come from? And we're almost like this bowl of sellotape or gaffer tape or something that we just, when we're kind of growing up in families, stuff just attaches to us and we can't like, making a lot of money is a bad thing. And like, oh, but where did that come from? Oh, well, that came from my mother or father or uncle. You say this thing over and over again. And like, I've just assumed that that's the case because I've heard it so many times. I've never actually stopped for a minute to have a look at it and actually saying, well, is that true? Or even if it's not true, is it serving me? Is it kind of helping me in some way as well? But I think it's very hard for people to kind of do that on their own. Obviously, it is possible to do it on their own, but sometimes having that other person that can help reflect those things back to you and just kind of question, well, is that really what you believe? Or is that just what you've been told to believe over the years?
Right. Well, it's interesting when I trained in the coaching modality, they would say the idea behind this whole process is almost like a 1 + 1 = 3. So what you could dream up for your life has a certain limitation. What I could dream up for your life has a certain limitation. But it's almost like when those two converge, there's this symbiotic nature in which you can produce just so much more optimism and excitement for your life and than what you can on your own. And for that reason, I still have a coach myself, always, for the last 10 years, because you're never done and you need that.
Yes, it can additive, which I think actually California is a bit of a generalization, but is something both having lived there as well. They are, as a place, it's very good for the yes and being additive, whereas maybe other parts of the world are going to give you 100 reasons why something is not necessarily going to work and why you're wrong and why you can never do it as an individual. But could you tell us, in your own creative journey, a time when you worked on something, you worked on a project or something you were doing, you gave it your heart and your soul, but for whatever reason, it just didn't work out like you'd hoped? And more importantly, what was the lesson that you took from that experience?
I have a slightly different take on this than perhaps other responses you've gotten in the past, but it really has informed my life. It's informed my work, and it was a huge kind of epiphany moment for me. And it wasn't necessarily something that I failed at. It was somebody else deeming me a failure. So a bit of context, I grew up in an extremely conservative, born-again Christian family, lots of dogma, and in hindsight, almost cultish, very, very militant. And my father passed away in 2007, and I was, the kid who started working when I was 14, put myself through college, got married, moved out of the house, totally self-sufficient, 2 younger brothers who ended up doing jail time for various issues. But my mom, especially after my dad had passed, kind of lumped us all in together, saying like, I failed as a parent because none of my children are still following this religion. So the day of my father's funeral service, my past career was in makeup artistry. So I actually performed the makeup on him for his viewing. So putting makeup on the corpse of my father as I'm contending with my own grief. And I speak at the service to hundreds of people. That day I get home to my mother's house. And of course she's, racked with grief as well. And she says, I guess it just feels like we failed as parents. And so I kind of took a step back, and the only thing I could muster at that moment was, you probably shouldn't say that to children. Probably shouldn't say that to children. And she was like, well, that's just how I felt. That's just how I feel. And that was a pivotal moment for me, because I realized that if I was truly going to do this work, and if I was going to teach people how to find their voice and use it, and if I was going to advocate for not being so invested in the opinions of others, so much so that you could actually allow a parent to be disappointed in you, that's freedom. And so at that moment, it was like, okay, I either choose to make you happy, to make my mother happy at the complete sacrifice of self. I would have to completely negate my intuition, who I am, what I believe in order to make her happy. Or I could say I choose me. And I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine who grew up in the same organization, religious organization. And she said, how did you come to peace with who you had to be with your family? And I said, I acknowledged and made peace with the fact that I would probably always be disappointing to them. And that if they were going to carry that, I was going to allow that to be theirs, that it was not going to be mine. Because up until then, I was twisting and contorting, and I was telling my husband, like, don't bring up this when we go to my family. Don't talk about Howard Stern or gay rights or South Park or, don't talk about any of these things. Don't cuss. And that was the moment when I went, no, okay, if it's a matter of you or me, I'm going to choose me. I choose me. And it's not always an ultimatum, but in that situation, it very much was. And then it became kind of the impetus for a lot of the work I do now.
And I think that's a very courageous decision, because it would have been so easy for you to have stayed on that other track, stay with the blue pill instead of the red pill, or whichever way it is around, where you just kind of went on because you want to please your family. There's a certain way of doing things. You kind of have to be the exception to the rule. And you mentioned your brothers, and I always think of that story of I think it was possibly you mentioned Tony Robbins. I think it was possibly even a Tony Robbins when he said there was a study of twins, and they had this father, and this father was like an alcoholic and not a great guy really, and one of the sons went on to go to jail, and the other son went on to become very successful in what he did. And when they asked both sons, how did you end up like you ended up in the place that you're in today? And they both said, well, with a father like that, how could it be how could it be different?
Right.
So they had the same experiences, but they just chose to take different lessons from it.
Exactly right.
And so you just chose, okay, I'm going to choose myself. I'm going to choose myself, and I'm going to do this, not because it's self-serving, but it's actually, you're going to leave things, the best of you is going to be stuck there behind, and you probably you would have regretted it as time went on as well. As you've been going through your creative journey, and you're obviously a podcast, and you're a coach, has there been a key aha moment or a light bulb moment when you've kind of gone, okay, this is the direction I want to go with my work. This is how I want to help people and add value to people's lives?
Yes, I actually have to give major credit to my very best friend and colleague. Her name is Andrea Owen. So I went through sort of a existential crisis in 2015 when it came down to my business. And up until that point, I had been working a lot in a relationship medium where I was working with people to actually enjoy being partnered. So it wasn't like singles or dating or anything like that. It was how to actually have a thriving relationship inside of a romantic union. And I was just feeling unfulfilled in it and coming up against roadblocks. And so I just went back to the basics with everything. And I started looking at, what do people come to me for? What is the attraction? I started going back down to kind of ground zero. And I was talking about it with this friend of mine. And she said, and I was tossing around this idea of like, I help people find their voice. There's something here with communication or standing up for themselves or something about that, boundaries. I don't know. And she was like, it's not just that you help people find their voice. It's that you help them use it. And I was like, well, tell me more about that. And she goes, well, all of us, and she was talking about our group of mastermind at the time, anytime we don't know how to say something, I don't know how to talk to my husband, I don't know how to talk to my in-laws, I don't know how to tell a client, thank you, but no thank you. We all ask you, like, what's the phrases? What are the words? So not only do you get people to that place where they're like, I am valuable enough, my voice matters enough to tell an in-law, stop feeding my kid sugary drinks. Or, not only that, but then also how to deliver that. What is the cadence? What's the rhythm? What's the actual kindness that you can share that sort of polarizing concepts with, and that really, when she said that to me, I went, that's totally what I do. That's totally what I do. Yeah. And so that really has changed things over the last handful of years.
But that's that also the power of the mastermind, having those group of people around you that can understand you, can hold you accountable, can point things out that you're blind when you're kind of you're a bit blind to them because you're not kind of coming from that place. So I love that you had those people around you that could see really where your kind of genius lay, where you could add the most to people's lives, and because not everyone has that. And also I think the kind of stuff that you do. Then you mentioned this idea of not just idea of helping people find their voice, but then going on to express that voice as well. I was reading a book. Someone sent me this a book recently, a publisher, and I was reading this book, and it was a really great book. It was a really well researched and everything, but all it was about was that helping find the voice bit. And then I kind of, and it's a different topic, but then I kind of went, actually, I want to know like the now what. That's the bit I kind of like, okay, I now know what the problem is and what the issue is. And like, I've discovered this thing, and now like, okay, so what? Now what do I do with this thing? So,
tell me what to say.
Say what to say. And I got really frustrated with it. Like, oh, you could have like half that book and then spent the other half, doing the what's next part. So that's great that you recognize that, and the people recognize that in that your ability to be able to do that.
Yeah. I'm actually working on a book currently about that. And the whole final section is all scripts, everything from what do you do when stranger wants to rub your pregnant belly and you're like, oh my God, don't touch me, all the way to severing a business partnership or asking an adult child to move out of your home. All of that, or what to say to the people asking you for money in front of a supermarket that you don't believe in their organization, how can we live in a more honest and of integrity place without being assholes? Like, we can still be really kind and lovely with how we deliver that information.
Now, in the work that you do, what tools or apps or mobile apps you find really useful for the work that you do?
That's interesting. Well, one of the ways that I communicate with all of my colleagues and all of my clients is through an app called Voxer. It's Voxer, and it's basically like a walkie-talkie app. But it's amazing because you can also speed people up 2, 3, or 4 times fast. I tend to be fairly verbose, so I find it helpful for my clients. They can listen to the message over and over and over. And I also use a meditation app specifically for myself every morning by a brand called Welzen, and it's Welzen. And I will do that literally in bed before I even get up for the day. And usually just like a 10-minute meditation, get my head straight. Or, I'll work on manifestation or whatever is present at the moment.
What about a book? If you were to recommend, not one of your own books, but a book you would recommend to someone, maybe that's in that place, that place of inner critic, or that place of wanting to please people, or they frankly just don't even know this idea of finding your voice in the first place. Is there a book that you would recommend to them?
Oh gosh, there's tons that come to mind. If you're looking for kind of just overall, I need to make some headway in just this whole believing in myself place, I would definitely suggest You Are a Badass by Jen Sincero. And if you want specifically around like tough conversations, there is a great book called, it's 3 different authors, and I believe it's called just Tough Conversations, or Challenging Conversations. I might have to get that to you. What
we'll do is we can find that, and I'll place the link here below. The Jen Sincero, that book has been consistently recommended by a number of different guests, and she has a great she has a great story, music background as well.
Yes.
So I love that's a great book. So we're going to put those links below. We'll put that one today, and also the tough or difficult conversations one. What about an album? If there's one album that you were to recommend maybe people to check out, that maybe is something that means a lot to you and you want other people to listen to, what would that album be?
Well, I am a huge Alanis Morissette fan, and she released an album in the late 90s called Supposed Former Infatuation Junkie. It's quite the mouthful. But aside from having junkie in the title, which I appreciate, there is a song on that album called That I Would Be Good. And that song, to me, is truly the embodiment of what worthiness is and what enoughness is. So a lot of the lyrics are kind of saying that I would be good even if I did nothing. I would be good even if I gained 10 pounds. I would be good if I never wrote or sang ever again. And so it's this idea that all of the things that we identify with and say, like, this is what makes me valuable. I'm a creative, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a speaker, I'm a this. If we were to remove that element, would you feel like your worth is gone? If you no longer had a role as a parent or a colleague or whatever it is that you throw everything into, does that have all of your identity? And the idea is you are valuable no matter what, whether your career ends tomorrow, whether whether people love you or not, like, you are valuable, period. So that song has been really instrumental and a great reminder as I'm doing the work I'm doing now.
Great. And we'll put a link to that here so people can check that out as well, maybe on Spotify. I'm going to leave you with a kind of final question here as well as we start to wrap up. I want you to imagine that you have to restart things. I'm going to have you imagine that you suddenly, no one knows you, you know no one, you have no connections. You have to completely restart your career. But thankfully, you've got all the knowledge and the skills that you've acquired over the years. What would you do? How would you restart things?
I would do the exact opposite of what I did, which is I would hire somebody immediately. I would hire, after doing extensive research and due diligence, I would hire somebody specifically to help. I would probably skip branding and all of that stuff, and I would probably just go straight to business model. Like, what is it that I want to create in this world? Reason being is when I first started, I was 100% passion, no strategy. So I just thought, ooh, all my passion people are going to see it and they're just want to give me money to help them, And as I've gotten immersed in this online marketplace, really, there's a lot of strategy that goes into it. So I would immediately search out somebody I can learn the strategy and passion being kind of married together immediately. I waited far too long to do that.
And if people want to reach out to you, talking about kind of online, if they want to kind of reach out to you, check about your programs, learn, you read your blog, you have the podcast as well. What's the best place for them to go? Where should they go and do that?
Just my main website is kind of the hub of everything that I do, which is thejoyjunkie.com. And junkie is JUNKIE. And you should be able to kind of find all my social media channels. I hang out on Instagram the most. But like you mentioned, I have a podcast and free and all sorts of stuff for you to come and hang out and get to know.
Wonderful. We'll put all those links here below. Amy, thank you so much for coming on today and talking us through your creative life and your creative journey. And I wish you all the best with your new adventures in North Carolina as well. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much. I am much obliged.
If you're interested in living a more creative life, then I'd love to invite you to join me as I share some of the most successful strategies and techniques that high-performing creatives use. I put them all together in a free downloadable ebook that you can get by going to jamestaylor.me. That's jamestaylor.me to get your free downloadable ebook on creativity.